Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Forgotten Summers: A Journey Through Lost Memories. Act 1, Whispers of a Forgotten Summer. The sound of cicadas hummed faintly through the cracks in the old wooden window frame. Soft shadows danced on the ceiling as the late afternoon sun filtered through fluttering curtains, stirring gently in the breeze. The room, tucked high in the attic of an aging countryside home, was quiet save for the slow, rhythmic ticking of an antique clock on the dresser. It was a silence that invited memories to awaken. Elian lay sprawled across a wide bed layered with faded quilts. His arm dangled lazily off the side, fingers grazing the cool wooden floor. He had returned to the farmhouse just that morning, his grandfather's house, now empty, now his after more than a decade away. What was once a routine summer pilgrimage had become a distant relic of childhood, wrapped in dust and the scent of aged pine. The attic room had barely changed since he last slept in it. Same slanted ceiling with scuffed beams. Same crooked shelf crammed with forgotten adventure books. And that same window overlooking the wheat fields, now golden with late summer ripeness. He closed his eyes and breathed in deeply. There was a fragrance here he had missed: wild lavender from the garden below, warm wood from the floorboards, and something else. Something nostalgic, like sunlight and old stories. And then, it came. A whisper in his mind, as if the house itself spoke. Remember? A vivid image flickered across his inner vision, the summer of 1987, when he was 10 years old, the summer that felt like it had lasted forever. Suddenly, the attic seemed to shimmer with light. And as if drawn into the folds of time, Elian drifted backward into memory. The scene unfolded slowly at first. A bright bedroom. The creak of a ladder. A voice from downstairs calling his name. Elian. Breakfast's almost ready. It wasn't his voice now, but his voice then, higher pitched, full of wonder. And the voice calling him belonged not to silence but to someone alive, warm, loving. Grandmother Aline. 10-year-old Elian rubbed his eyes and sat up in the bunk bed. The sunlight fell across his face in golden stripes, warm and comforting. His little legs dangled over the edge as he leaned forward and peered out the wooden window just in time to see a hawk circling lazily above the wheat fields. This was how summer began. His room, tucked beneath the slanted roof, buzzed with life. A fly zipped past his ear. Outside, the distant moo of a cow and the cluck of chickens added texture to the morning. The house smelled of cinnamon and frying butter pancakes, no doubt. And he knew, without looking, that his grandfather Mirek was already out by the barn, boots in the dew. He slid down the ladder in one smooth motion, bare feet hitting the floor with a soft thud. The hallway was dim and cool, with patches of sun lighting up dust motes in the air like tiny stars. He passed the room with the oval mirror and the strange porcelain dolls. It always gave him the creeps. In the kitchen, Grandmother Aline was humming an old tune while flipping pancakes on a sizzling griddle. She wore a pale yellow apron and had flour smudged across her cheek. The windows were open, and the breeze carried the sound of birdsong and wind chimes. "There's my sleepy explorer," she said, smiling without turning. "Hope you're hungry." "I'm starving," he replied with theatrical drama, plopping down on the wicker chair at the breakfast table. His plate was soon filled with golden pancakes drizzled in syrup, thick slices of orchard peaches, and a cold glass of fresh milk. Elian ate with gusto, swinging his legs under the table. Across from him, the chair his brother had once sat in remained empty. He paused, fork mid-air. "No, not today. Today was just for the good memories." After breakfast, Grandmother handed him a small canvas satchel and winked. "Go see if your grandfather needs help with the calves. And don't forget your boots this time." Outside, the world was drenched in sunshine. The sky was impossibly blue, and the wheat fields swayed in long, whispering waves. Elian took off running down the path behind the house, where the grass grew tall and wildflowers reached for the sky. Everything smelled sharper in the country. Earth, clover, hay. His boots thudded against the packed dirt as he approached the barn, where Grandpa Mirek stood silhouetted in the doorway, a pitchfork in hand and a crooked grin on his weathered face. "There he is," Mirek called. "Ready to work, are you?" Elian grinned. "Always." They spent the next hour mucking stalls, pouring feed, and laughing over some ridiculous chicken that kept following them. Elian loved the barn, the smell of hay, the way the light filtered through the slats, and the warmth of the animals. It was here, in this simple morning ritual, that he always felt something bigger than himself. Something grounded. Eternal. And as he stood beside his grandfather, staring out at the hills beyond the fence, young Elian whispered to himself something he didn't quite understand at the time but which would one day mean everything. "I hope this summer never ends." The memory shimmered again, fading into the golden light of the attic. Present-day Elian opened his eyes. The room was unchanged. But his heart was brimming. And somewhere deep inside, the summer of 1987 had just begun again. Act 2, Morning Beneath the Golden Eaves. The farmhouse was a symphony of gentle chaos that morning, the kind of chaos that only happens in a place where time moves slower and every detail seems to glow with warmth. After the barn chores, Elian followed his grandfather back up the narrow trail to the house. Mirek carried a wooden crate of fresh eggs, while Elian cradled a small glass jar filled with wild blackberries they'd found growing along the fence. The berries left violet stains on his fingers, and he kept licking them as they walked. "There's a rhythm to mornings like these," Mirek said, not quite looking at him, eyes squinting toward the eastern tree line. "If you listen closely, the land'll hum to you." Elian tilted his head, half expecting to hear an actual hum from the wheat fields. All he could make out was the breeze, a chorus of grasshoppers, and the distant creak of the windmill turning slowly beside the well. Still, it felt like something was speaking not in words, but in rustling leaves, in the way sunlight shimmered on the wildflowers. And that was enough. Inside the house, Grandmother Aline was watering her plants on the windowsill, each pot labeled with neat, handwritten tags: lemon balm, sweet mint, evening primrose. The room smelled like soil and sunlight and sugar. "Wash up, boys," she called. "Your second breakfast is getting cold." "Second breakfast?" Elian asked, wide-eyed. "Very tart," she whispered with a wink. "Made with love and cinnamon." They gathered around the small square table under the east window. Elian's chair creaked as he settled in, the same old wood chair with his name lightly scratched into the underside. Grandfather Mirek took his seat with a groan that was only half playful. They ate quietly, the way people do when the food is good and the company doesn't require chatter. The tart was soft and warm, oozing juice and sweetness with every bite. Elian savored it slowly, watching how the light fell across his grandparents' faces, familiar lines, softened by time and love. After breakfast, while the grown UPS spoke in murmurs about the day's work and weather, Elian excused himself and slipped out to the front porch. It was his favorite place in the world. The porch wrapped around the house like a lazy arm, with peeling white railings and a swing that creaked just right when pushed gently. Elian hopped up onto it, tucking his legs beneath him and letting the breeze wash over his face. From here, he could see almost everything: the golden sweep of wheat fields, the orchard in the distance with its apple trees standing like quiet sentinels, and the long dirt road that stretched into a hazy blur toward town. He leaned back and closed his eyes. Then came the sound, a soft metallic clink followed by a rustling. Elian sat up. At the edge of the field, near the mailbox, a red bicycle had just come to a stop. A girl dismounted. She wore denim overalls and a floppy hat too big for her head. Her name came to him like a forgotten lyric. Marla. She waved when she saw him. "You gonna sit there all day, or come see what I found?" Elian blinked, stunned by the sudden presence of someone he hadn't thought of in years. Marla had been his closest friend. Every summer he visited, a whirlwind of ideas and bravado. She always had a mystery to chase, a story to build. And apparently, even now, in memory, she still did. Without waiting for a reply, she darted around the corner, disappearing down the side path past the orchard. Elian hesitated for only a second. Then he was up, racing across the porch, leaping down the steps two at a time, and chasing after the echo of laughter and the blur of her straw hat. His feet pounded the dry earth, his satchel flapping at his side. As he ran, something inside him stirred, something electric, something alive. This wasn't just memory anymore. This was something more. Act 3, The Dust Path and the Secret Gate. Elian followed the narrow side path, breath quickening, sneakers crunching over pebbles and dry dirt. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting dappled shadows through the overhanging branches of the orchard trees. Bees buzzed lazily near the wild honeysuckle, and the air carried that unmistakable summer scent, sweet, earthy, and endless. Ahead, Marla's laughter echoed through the rows of trees. "You're getting slow, city boy," she called over her shoulder without even turning. Her voice had that teasing, lilting tone, the same as always. "I've been here 3 hours, he puffed. "Give me a break." She finally stopped at the edge of the orchard, where a line of thick bushes grew in a tangle between the trees and an old split-rail fence. Nestled between the brush was something Elian hadn't seen in years: a narrow wooden gate, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. Marla brushed aside the leaves like a magician revealing a trick. "Still here," she said. "I checked yesterday. The hinges are a bit rusty, but it opens." Elian stared at it. "You remembered this place?" "I never forgot it." This gate had been their secret. When they were kids, they had discovered it one afternoon while chasing a rabbit. It led to a forgotten trail, barely used, that twisted down toward the creek and disappeared into the woods beyond. Their parents had warned them not to go too far, but of course they had. Every summer they ventured deeper, calling it the Path of Lost Things, where old toys, forgotten dreams, and maybe even time itself got tangled in the roots. "You coming?" Marla asked, already pushing the gate open with a creak that echoed through the orchard like a question. Elian stepped forward, his hand brushing against the rough wood of the gate post. Something stirred deep inside him, a mix of hesitation and anticipation. "I'm not 10 anymore," he muttered. "No," she said, smiling. "But the path still remembers." They stepped through. On the other side, the world shifted. The air felt cooler, the shadows longer. The trail was still there, though barely overgrown with ferns and laced with sunbeams. Trees arched above like a cathedral of green. Each footstep crunched softly on the forest floor, muffled by fallen pine needles and ancient leaves. "Look," Marla whispered. She pointed to a row of stacked stones, half buried in moss. A memory returned. They had once built that together as a marker for lost explorers. Elian knelt beside it, brushing away the dirt and leaves. "It's still here," he said softly. They continued walking, silence between them now, but not uncomfortable. The kind of silence only true friends shared, where words weren't needed. Eventually, the trail opened up into a small clearing, where the sun poured in like golden syrup. In the center was the old tree stump, their story throne. Years ago, they had taken turns sitting there, inventing wild tales about goblins, time travelers, and invisible kingdoms beneath the soil. "Sit," Marla said, gesturing dramatically. "Your turn to tell the story." Elian smirked, brushing off the stump before sitting down. "Okay." Once upon a time, two kids found a secret path that remembered every step they ever took. And when they returned older, maybe wiser, the path remembered them, too. Marla nodded solemnly. And the path had been waiting. Because something was coming. Something the grown UPS had forgotten. But the kids had once known. There was a pause. Elian stared at her. Did you just invent a plot twist? He asked. I did, she grinned. You're welcome. They both laughed. The kind of laugh that lives in the chest, not just the throat. The kind that smells like pine and dirt and unspoken truths. But even as the laughter faded, Elian felt something shift again. Not in the air but in himself. He had thought this was just memory. Just a dream born from attic dust and old summers. But now he wasn't so sure. Maybe this wasn't just the past. Maybe it was a doorway. And maybe just maybe Marla was right. Something was waiting. Act 4, The Thing Beneath the Roots. The warmth of the sun filtered through the trees like honey, casting golden dapples on the clearing. Elian sat still on the old tree stump, Marla sprawled out beside him in the grass, arms behind her head, staring at the clouds with the casual ease of someone who had never quite left this place. A breeze picked up, rustling the treetops and carrying the scent of pine and river water. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called once, then again, as if answering a question neither of them had asked. So, Marla said eventually, do you remember the box? Elian blinked. The what? She sat up and brushed the leaves from her overalls. The box we buried. Right over there, beneath the split root oak. Elian's heart skipped. It came rushing back now, the image of a small tin lunchbox, faded red, with a cracked handle and stickers of comic book heroes peeling at the corners. They had called it the vault. Inside, they'd put everything that mattered to them that summer, a folded map they'd drawn by hand, a marble they'd sworn was lucky, a pressed flower from the orchard, and a letter written by both of them in mismatched handwriting. They had made a pact, if they ever came back, together, they would dig it up. No way, it's still there, Elian said, though he was already standing, already moving toward the tree. The split root oak stood proudly at the edge of the clearing, its trunk thick and ancient, with roots like frozen waves crashing into the soil. One of them had grown in a strange arch, creating a small hollow beneath it, a perfect hiding spot for childhood treasure. He dropped to his knees and began pulling away the leaves and soft earth with his hands. Marla joined him wordlessly, her fingers working faster than his. The soil was damp, rich with years of decay and rebirth. A worm wriggled free and vanished into the shadows. Then a sound. Clink. They both froze. Elian scraped gently around the edge, and a flash of rusty red appeared through the dirt. It's really here, he whispered. Together, they unearthed the tin box, crusted with dirt and rust but intact. He ran his thumb over the latch. It stuck at first, then gave way with a creak that sent a shiver down his spine. Inside, the contents were still there: the marble, the map, brittle but legible. The flower had long since disintegrated into dust. And there, at the bottom, was the folded piece of paper. Elian picked it up with care, unfolding it slowly. Their letter. It was written in purple marker, edges smudged by time and moisture. The words were simple, but they hit him like a freight train. If you're reading this, we made it back. Don't forget the promise. The summer must never be lost. And if the path changes, follow the sound of the chimes. Elian looked at Marla. Did we write that part? Marla tilted her head. I don't remember the chimes. They sat in silence for a moment. Then on the breeze the soft, unmistakable sound of distant chimes. It was faint, but clear. A delicate tinkling, like glass touching glass, coming from deeper in the woods, where the trail twisted into a darker canopy. Neither of them spoke. The air felt charged now. The playfulness of their childhood reunion had shifted into something else, something older, more layered. As if the forest itself had been waiting for this moment. You hear it, right? Elian asked. Marla nodded. It wasn't there a minute ago. I thought this was just memory, he said, voice low. Marla glanced toward the trees. Maybe memory is a door. And maybe we just opened it? They stood, almost in unison. Elian tucked the marble and the map into his satchel, then closed the tin box and carefully placed it at the base of the stump again, like an offering returned. They followed the sound. The trail narrowed as it dipped between tall pines and twisted brush. Shadows grew deeper here, and the air grew cooler, damper. The chimes rang again, closer now, melodic and oddly rhythmic. Not wind-driven. Intentional. Then they saw it. Hanging from an ancient tree was a wind chime, but unlike any they had ever seen. It was crafted from carved wood, bone, and metal woven with dried herbs and feathers. It swayed gently, though the air was still. Beneath it stood a stone marker, half covered in moss. There were symbols etched into it, not letters, not numbers, but something older, circular, almost runic. Marla stepped forward. What is this? Elian reached out to touch the stone. The moment his fingers grazed it, a low hum began to vibrate through the clearing. The wind chime rang once more, and then silence fell. Complete, total silence. No birds. No breeze. Even their breathing felt distant. Then, from the stone, light. A soft pulse barely visible, like a heartbeat beneath the moss. Once. Twice. Then gone. Elian stepped back. Okay, so. What just happened? Marla didn't respond. She was staring at the stone, her brow furrowed. I think this place was part of the stories we made up, she murmured. But, what if they weren't just stories? Elian turned to her. You think we imagined this into existence? No. I think we remembered something that was already here. Another pulse from the stone. This time brighter. The wind picked up again, and far off, another chime rang a different tone, a different location. It was calling them. And just like that, the trail stretched ahead again, darker, older, full of questions. But Elian no longer felt like a visitor to memory. He felt like a character in a story just beginning to remember his role. Act 5, Echoes Beyond the Stone. They stood there for a long moment, two figures beneath an ancient tree, wind chimes swaying above them, the soft echo of its final ring still lingering like a whisper between worlds. The stone marker continued to pulse faintly, emitting a rhythm that seemed to vibrate not through the ground, but through their bones. Elian placed a hand over his chest, feeling the thrum, and realized with a strange sense of awe that it matched his heartbeat. Do you feel that? He asked quietly. Marla nodded, eyes locked on the symbols. It's like it knows we're here. They had once come this far years ago, as children, but the stone had never revealed itself. Back then, it had been nothing more than a mossy boulder, overlooked among the trees. They had played tag around it, used it as a base during make-believe missions. But never once did it glow. Never once had it called to them. Something had changed. Or perhaps, something had awoken. We should go back, Elian said, though his voice lacked conviction. To what? Marla replied. To pretending this doesn't mean something. He looked around. The forest behind them, the familiar path, even the clearing, all felt different now. As if they had stepped across a veil. The air shimmered with stillness, but not silence. Beneath it all, Elian could sense something watching. Not malicious but ancient. Like a memory that had never been spoken aloud. He crouched next to the stone, brushing away the moss with care. The symbols became clearer, a spiral surrounded by three waves, a triangle within a circle, and a mark that looked eerily similar to the marble he'd taken from the box. He reached into his satchel and retrieved the small, cloudy green sphere. When he held it close to the stone, the glow intensified. Marla gasped. It's reacting to it. What is this marble? Elian asked aloud. We always called it lucky, but... Marla stepped back. Try placing it on the center mark. Elian hesitated, then did as she said. The moment the marble touched the spiral, the stone gave a low hum, and a sudden rush of wind burst from the trees. Leaves swirled in a vortex around them. The chimes above sang wildly, as if caught in a storm. Then silence again. The marble was gone. The spiral now glowed fully, lines of soft green light crawling along the edges of the stone, like veins spreading from a heart. And then, without warning, the ground beneath the stone trembled. A soft crack echoed through the clearing as the stone split slightly in the center, not broken, but opened. Inside was a small compartment, no bigger than a shoebox. Within it lay a scroll bound in twine, and a small, hand-carved token made of bone and wood shaped like a key, but not to any door Elian had ever seen. He reached in and took the scroll. It was heavier than expected, wrapped in a layer of waxed cloth. When he unrolled it, he found not words, but a map, one drawn in ink that shimmered faintly, like it had been written under moonlight. The forest was on it. So was the orchard. But there were places marked they had never known existed. Trails that went further, deeper, and something labeled in elegant script. The hollow of returning. I don't think this was ever just a game, Marla said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elian looked at her. You think we were meant to find this? I think, she said, this is what we forgot. And now the summer wants us to remember. A rustle behind them made them both turn sharply. From the edge of the woods, a shadow moved. Not a person. Not an animal. Something in between. Tall, willowy, cloaked in golden mist. It stood still for a moment, watching. Then it lifted one arm slowly, deliberately, and pointed toward the farthest trail marked on the map. Then it vanished. Gone without a sound. Elian and Marla stared at each other, neither daring to speak. Finally, Elian found his voice. Did we just get invited? Marla smiled, not out of joy, but something deeper. Maybe. Or maybe we just got chosen. They stood in silence again, listening. And then far in the distance another chime rang. Not from their direction. Not from the tree. But from beyond. They turned toward the sound. Let's go, Marla said. Elian didn't argue. They gathered the scroll, the key-shaped token, and tucked the map safely into his bag. As they walked, the forest closed behind them, not ominously, but like a story eager to turn the next page. And as they stepped deeper into the woods beyond the bounds of what they remembered, Elian felt it again. The heartbeat of the summer. The story calling them forward. And a single phrase, whispered not by Marla, not by the wind, but perhaps by the very land beneath their feet. The summer must never be lost. Act 6, The Road of Red Dust. The trail began like any other. It curved gently between tall trees, their trunks painted with streaks of lichen and shadow. The soil beneath their feet turned from soft forest floor to the familiar red dust that Elian remembered from his childhood, the very same path he had once wandered alone, armed with a walking stick and an imagination wide as the sky. But now, the path was no longer just a ribbon of earth winding toward some forgotten field. Now, it glowed. Not in any obvious, magical way, no sparks, no shimmering light. But Elian felt it beneath his feet, a hum in the solace of his shoes. The red dirt seemed warmer, somehow, as if sunlight from another time still lived within it. Marla walked ahead, arms swinging lightly, fingers brushing against low-hanging branches. "Remember how we used to call this the endless road?" she asked, glancing back. Elian nodded. "Because we never reached the end. We always got distracted. The frog pond, the old scarecrow, the blackberry thickets. Every summer we promised to go further, and every time, something pulled us back." Elian smiled. Maybe that was the magic. Getting pulled back. Marla stopped suddenly. Ahead, the trail forked. One path veered left, up a gentle slope lined with cottonwoods. The other turned sharply right, descending into a narrow passage choked with brambles and fog. They both turned to look at the map. It had changed. The ink shimmered anew, and a red thread once invisible now traced a path from their current location, down the steeper, thorny trail. Elian held it up. "Looks like we're not choosing this time." Marla didn't hesitate. "Then let's follow it." As they moved into the fog-drenched path, the air grew heavier, soaked in dew and the perfume of wet earth. Brambles scraped their arms, and once, Elian stumbled on a route that hadn't been there a second earlier. The forest narrowed, pressing in, trees bending like listeners. And then, abruptly it opened. They stepped into a field neither remembered. It was sunlit, but the sky above it was wrong, too still, too pale. The field stretched wide, the red earth dry and cracked like an old painting, with tall grass swaying in wind that didn't quite touch their skin. In the center stood a weathered signpost. It was carved from bone-white wood, with faded letters etched in looping cursive. "To the hollow of returning follow what echoes." Below the sign, nailed crookedly, was an old tin can. Marla reached out and tapped it with her finger. It swung once. Then a soft echo rang from it, not metallic, but melodic. A single note. Then another from somewhere off to the left. Another from the right. Another behind them. They froze. "The echoes," Elian whispered. "There." "Calling," Marla said. "But not from the same direction." They stood between the sound of choices. Each echo came with a memory. Faint but clear. To the left the scent of rain on hot dirt, and the sound of laughter under umbrellas. To the right the taste of lemonade, the creak of a porch swing, the sigh of twilight. Behind them the smell of old books, dust motes in the light, and the hush of a library long forgotten. Forward silence. No memory. Only stillness. Elian swallowed hard. "The hollow is straight ahead, right?" Marla checked the map. "Yes. But the echoes are trying to distract us. Or test us." They pressed forward. With each step, the world quieted. The red soil gave way to smooth stone. The grass faded, replaced by dry moss and pale petals scattered across the ground. They descended into a shallow valley, ringed by stones arranged in a spiral, some standing, others fallen, like old giants who had long since laid down to rest. In the center was a hollow. Not a hole. Not a pit. But a dip in the land that curved gently, like a forgotten cradle. There, in its center, stood a small, circular stone archway. It led nowhere. Behind it, more field. Before it, emptiness. But the air around it shimmered. As if the doorway bent not just space but memory itself. Marla stepped forward, her voice hushed. "This is it?" Elian stared at the arch. "There's nothing through it." "Maybe that's the point." She reached into her pocket and held up the key-shaped token they had found in the stone chamber. Its surface, once dull, now glowed faintly. She stepped closer to the arch and pressed the token against the center of the stone frame. Nothing happened. Then a breeze. Soft, like breath on the nape of the neck. The petals stirred. And the world beyond the arch changed. What was once empty became familiar. A road appeared, not dusty red, but paved with soft stones. On either side stood lamp posts from another time, flickering faintly in a dusk that hadn't yet arrived. And at the far end a cottage. Small, with smoke rising from the chimney. A light in the window. Music playing. A place Elian knew, but had never been. His voice trembled. "I know this place." Marla's eyes widened. "So do I." They turned to each other. The hollow of returning wasn't a place on a map. It was a place the soul remembered. It was home not as it was, but as it should have been. And beyond that arch, someone was waiting. Act 7, Through the Arch of Memory. The world stilled as they stood before the arch. The image beyond it shimmered faintly, like sunlight on water, solid and unreal at once. The stone frame, though simple in shape, held weight beyond its size. Elian felt it in his chest, the tug of something familiar and unfinished. Like a dream he had once tried to remember, only to have it slip through his fingers. Marla reached for his hand. "You ready?" He gave the smallest nod. And together, they stepped through. The air changed instantly. No sound. No rush. Just warm. Like stepping into a memory mid-breath. They stood now on a paved path lined with tall grasses, golden in the dusk light. The scent of sweet hay and distant wood smoke filled the air. The lampposts flickered above them, casting long shadows that swayed like quiet dancers. The wind was gentle, tugging lightly at Elian's shirt sleeve, not demanding, just reminding. Ahead, the cottage awaited. Whitewashed wood. A crooked chimney. Wicker chairs on the front porch. It was a place Elian had never truly seen, and yet he knew every inch. The sound of a screen door creaking in the breeze made his chest tighten. His feet moved before his mind gave permission. Marla followed beside him in silence. The path curved around a small garden, wild but tended. Strawberries, mint, and morning glories spilled over onto the cobbles. A wind chime shaped like a crescent moon clinked softly above the doorway. And just beside the porch steps a mailbox. Old, metal, slightly dented. Painted a dusty blue. Elian stopped cold. "I know this," he whispered. "This is where I used to check the mail every morning." Marla said nothing, only placed a hand on his shoulder. He stepped forward. The mailbox creaked open easily. Inside were 2 envelopes. One addressed in sprawling handwriting, slightly messy, looping letters. The other was in his own handwriting. From when he was a child. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. The envelope was addressed. "To grown-up me, if I ever forget how the summer feels." He opened it slowly. Inside was a piece of lined notebook paper, yellowed with time. The writing was awkward and large, written in purple marker. "Dear me. I hope you still remember the smell of pancakes and mint. I hope you still think clouds look like dragons and rabbits. I hope you didn't forget the path behind the barn, or the way Grandma laughs when she burns the toast. But if you did forget, it's okay. That's why I made this place. So you could come back. So you could feel it again. Don't be sad you grew up. Just remember who you were." Elian stared at the words until they blurred. A tear slipped down his cheek, falling onto the paper, bleeding the ink ever so slightly. Marla was reading her own letter in silence. Her lips moved faintly, as if reciting a poem to herself. Then music. Soft piano notes floated from inside the cottage. Elian looked up. The front door was slightly ajar. He stepped forward, reached out, and pushed it open. The cottage welcomed them like an old friend. Inside, the walls were lined with bookshelves, photos in frames that hadn't yet existed. A kettle whistled gently on a stove that gleamed like new. There were 2 mugs already set on the table, one with a fox, one with a shooting star. A patchwork quilt lay folded on the couch, just like the one he used to drag around the house at age 6. But it wasn't the details that stunned him. It was the feeling. Every object carried memory. Every scent, every sound, every glint of light through the curtain, it all pulled pieces of him back together. He sank into the chair by the window. Outside, the lamplight grew warmer. Marla sat opposite him. She held her letter tight in her hands. "This place," she said softly. "It's a memory. But it's more than that. It's a message, Elian said. From ourselves. From who we used to be. A wind passed through the open window. Outside, the wind chime rang again, but this time, a different tone. A deeper note. Marla stood slowly. That's another call. Elian looked up. Do we leave already? She nodded. This was one stop. One page. He rose, took one last glance at the room, every item glowing with quiet joy, and stepped back out onto the porch. There, beside the mailbox, something new had appeared. A path narrow, winding between lavender bushes and golden leaves. It hadn't been there before. It curved into the distance, where twilight and dawn seemed to meet. He turned to Marla. What do you think's next? She smiled, eyes glinting. Whatever we still need to remember. And with that, they walked forward, not away from memory, but deeper into it. Toward truths they had long forgotten. Toward echoes still waiting to be heard. The path closed behind them, quiet and complete. And in the window of the cottage, their childhood reflections lingered a moment longer, waving goodbye. Act 8, The Town That Remembers. The winding path beyond the cottage unfurled like a ribbon of golden silk, bending gently through hills of tall grass and dappled light. As Elian and Marla walked, the world around them softened, the air warmer, the sky painted with streaks of coral and lavender, caught between a dream and a sunset that never quite ended. In the distance, rooftops rose from the horizon. A steeple. A water tower. A row of buildings that curved around a town square. Elian slowed, blinking. That's Maple Bridge, Marla whispered. Or, at least, the way we remembered it. It wasn't quite the real town. No traffic. No noise. Just the delicate hum of cicadas and the gentle ring of bicycle bells echoing faintly through empty streets. They reached the edge of town at the stroke of dusk, stepping past a weathered wooden sign that read, "Welcome home. All memories honored. No moment too small." Elian grinned. Did it always say that? Marla smirked. Pretty sure we made that part up. The town itself felt like a living scrapbook. The candy shop window displayed rows of sweets in glass jars, each labeled with old-fashioned handwriting: lemon drops, mint toffees, blackberry taffy. The air carried hints of sugar and warm waffle cones. Across the street, the movie theater marquee read, "Now showing, every summer you forgot." But it was the post office that pulled them in. A squat brick building with ivy curling up one side. A blue mailbox out front. Inside, the place was empty but not abandoned. A bell above the door rang softly as they entered. Wooden cubby holes lined the walls, filled with envelopes in every color. There were letters sealed with wax, crumpled notes written in pencil, postcards with faded ink and bright, impossible stamps. Marla wandered toward the M section. Elian drifted toward E. And there, tucked into a small wooden slot, was an envelope with his name written in thick, familiar blue crayon. Elian, age 10, summer wish number 3. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a postcard. A drawing of a beach with a giant sandcastle and a purple kite in the sky. The message read, "Wish I was brave enough to build it big. Next time, I will." A memory struck like lightning. He and Marla, knee-deep in sand, hands sticky with salt and sunblock, building a sandcastle so wide it collapsed under its own weight. He'd wanted to make it tall, grand, a tower, but he'd been too scared it would fall. So he'd never tried. He stared at the card, heart aching and warm at once. "It's all here," he said softly. "Every little thing we thought no one else remembered." Marla held a handful of postcards in her hand. "Even the ones we forgot ourselves." They sat together on a wooden bench by the sorting desk, sorting through pieces of their own hearts. Some postcards were funny, "Remember when we tried to toast marshmallows over a candle?" Others were sad, "You cried when the dog ran away. You told no one. But you remembered." And then a strange one. Marla pulled it from the middle of her stack. It had no stamp, no picture, just black ink scrawled in hurried strokes. "The chimes are not just music. They're memory trying to return." Elian looked at her. "That wasn't ours, was it?" "No," she said slowly. "It's a warning." The bell above the door rang. But no one had entered. Instead, the world outside the windows began to shift. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. The warm tones of town dipped into cooler hues, blues, silvers, indigo. And in the distance not far came a sound they had grown familiar with. Chimes. But not delicate this time. Low. Echoing. Urgent. From across the town square, the doors of the library swung open. "New chapter," Marla said, standing. They crossed the street, moving quickly now. The candy shop flickered and dimmed behind them. The theater marquee began to change. "Coming soon," the moment you locked away. Inside the library, the air was dense with silence. Rows upon rows of books stood untouched, yet vibrating with something alive. On the far wall, a mural painted in swirling tones of memory depicted a field of wheat, a boy with a backpack, a girl on a bicycle. A house on a hill. Beneath it, a wooden plaque read, "For those who returned, and those who never dared." A single book lay open on the table. They approached. No title. No author. Just a page written in hand. To enter the hollow is to leave behind the shape of time. But there is more. There is always more. The story never ends, unless you forget to turn the page. The chimes sounded again. Louder. This time from within the library. Behind the shelves, a spiral staircase revealed itself descending down into what should have been the basement. But there was no basement here. Only more of the story. Marla looked at Elian. He nodded. And together, they descended. Act 9, The Room of Half-Remembered Dreams. The staircase spiraled downward like a question with no clear answer. Each step creaked softly beneath their feet, not with age, but with a kind of memory, the kind that presses gently on your shoulders when you're about to remember something you didn't know you forgot. The deeper Elian and Marla went, the cooler the air became. The scent of old paper faded, replaced by something softer like linen left in sunlight, or the first breeze after a summer rain. When they reached the bottom, there was no door. Just a curtain. A sheer veil of light, gently shifting in unseen wind. They exchanged a glance. And passed through. On the other side, the world softened. There were no walls. Only sky. But not the open blue of daytime, no, this sky was dim gold, the kind you see in the space between afternoon and dream, that weightless moment before sleep pulls you under. They stood on what appeared to be a floor of woven fabric, soft, cloud-like, but firm enough to walk on. And around them floated fragments. Images. Flickering like candlelight. A bicycle with one training wheel still attached. The shadow of a treehouse. A plate of pancakes balanced on a child's knee. A pair of muddy sneakers abandoned on a porch. Elian stared, breath caught in his throat. These are dreams, he said softly. Ours. Marla stepped closer to a floating image, a hallway bathed in golden light. I think, these are the ones we never finished. The ones we woke up from too early. She turned. And if this place is here, it means we never let them go. They wandered between the drifting fragments, each one humming faintly, not with sound, but with emotion. Elian passed a dream he vaguely recalled, him, flying on a blanket, above a field of fireflies. Another, darker one, standing in front of his childhood home, unable to go inside. Marla stopped at a glowing orb, larger than the rest. This one's strong, she whispered. Inside it, a younger version of her, curled up in a chair beside a window, hugging a backpack. It was the day before I had to leave for the city, she said. I pretended I was fine. Elian remembered. She'd vanished that summer, with only a scribbled note and a photograph left behind. He never asked why. They were kids, parting felt eternal, and questions too heavy. She turned to him. I didn't want to forget this dream, because in it, I stayed. The orb pulsed gently, then shifted. A doorway opened behind it. Tall, rounded, softly lit from within. Above it, etched in soft gold letters, "Enter to complete the dreams you once began." They hesitated, then stepped inside. The next room was darker, quieter. A large space filled with beds. Dozens, no, hundreds of small beds, each with a different quilt, a small lamp, a book resting on the pillow. Children slept in some of them, not real children, but echoes. Glimpses of former selves. Elian saw himself, age 9, curled up under a quilt with rockets on it, hand clutching a flashlight. Marla saw her younger self, hugging a stuffed wolf she'd thought lost forever. None of the figures stirred. But the moment Elian stepped forward, the figure in his bed breathed. Just once. A slow inhale. And with that breath, the entire room pulsed like a heartbeat. The lamps flickered. The books fluttered open. And from above, chimes. But not the urgent kind. This was a lullaby. A song of remembering. The book nearest him opened to a page halfway through. A letter in his own handwriting, age 10. I had a dream I was a fox, running through the fields, and nobody could catch me. But then I stopped. Because I didn't want to run forever. I just wanted someone to say, "It's okay. You can come home now." Marla reached for a nearby book. Her own voice, smaller, uncertain. I wasn't scared of the dark. I was scared no one would check under the bed. They stood there, two grown souls in the room of half-remembered dreams, surrounded by the children they used to be. And then, as if drawn by that quiet understanding, they lay down. Elian slid onto the bed beside his younger self. The figure faded gently. Not erased, merged. Like the memory had been reintegrated. Marla did the same. Their eyes closed. And the world hushed. Not into sleep but into rest. For a moment that stretched beyond time, they lay in the golden dark, breathing as one, remembering who they were without shame, without regret. And when they opened their eyes, they weren't in the room of beds anymore. They were in a clearing. Grass warm beneath them. Sunlight falling through tree branches above. A single wind chime ringing softly in the breeze. Elian sat up slowly. Marla stretched beside him. No words. Just breath. Just presence. And a feeling like something had been returned to them. Something quiet. Something whole. Act 10, Afternoon light and the threshold ahead. The clearing was still when Elian opened his eyes. Sunlight fell in long golden shafts through the canopy above, brushing his skin with warmth and stirring motes of dust that danced like tiny spirits. The grass beneath him was cool, springy, and smelled faintly of mint and clover. He sat up slowly. Marla lay nearby, still and peaceful, a soft smile on her lips as if she were holding on to the final moments of a dream. For a moment, Elian didn't move. Something had shifted inside him. Not just memory returning, something more profound. A realignment. A reunion with a part of himself that had been left behind long ago, waiting in silence like a child watching the window. He looked up at the sky. It had changed. The golden hue of the hollow was beginning to deepen. The soft light of late afternoon had crept in, that unmistakable moment when the day begins its gentle descent. The kind of light that made everything feel nostalgic. A breeze stirred the wind chime hanging from a tree branch nearby. Its notes were slower now. Measured. Like the rhythm of breath after weeping. Marla stirred beside him. When her eyes opened, they met his, and for a moment, they just sat there saying nothing, sharing the same breath of quiet understanding. "Did we really sleep?" she asked. Elian shook his head. "Not sleep. We rested." She nodded slowly, fingers brushing a leaf from her hair. "I feel like I just remembered a lullaby from when I was 3. He smiled. "And I remembered how the couch smelled at my grandparents' house in the summer. Dusty, floral, safe." They stood up together, brushing off their clothes. Their satchels were still slung over their shoulders. The map, once dull, now shimmered with fresh markings. A path extended from their clearing, winding through hills painted in amber light. And just ahead, at the edge of the trees, was an arch. Not stone this time. Wooden. Weathered. Adorned with strings of old postcards fluttering gently in the wind. Elian approached it slowly. The wood creaked in the breeze, as if whispering greetings from another life. Each postcard was familiar. He reached up and plucked one. A watercolor image of a treehouse at dusk. The back read, "Dear Elian, if you're reading this, you made it further than I did." I turned back. I got scared. I told myself it didn't matter, that growing up meant leaving this behind. But I was wrong. Don't stop. Not here. Beyond this arch is the truth. The one you buried even deeper than the dreams. His breath caught. Marla read over his shoulder. Who wrote that? Elian stared at the signature. It wasn't a name. Just a drawing. A fox. The same fox he used to draw on his notebooks when he was little, the one he pretended was his invisible friend whenever he felt lonely. His chest tightened. "It's me," he whispered. "But the version of me that stayed behind." He turned to her. "There's something beyond this. Something I've kept locked away. She met his gaze. And I'll walk with you through it. Together, they stepped beneath the wooden arch. The moment they passed through, the world around them sharpened. The colors dimmed, not with darkness but with realness. This wasn't memory anymore. This was truth. They now stood on the familiar dirt path behind Elian's grandparents' house, only it was different. Empty. Silent. The porch swing still moved gently, but no one was there. The fields beyond were golden, but the sound of insects was gone. The air held the stillness of a held breath. And then Elian saw it. The mailbox. The blue one. Only this time, it stood alone in the middle of the field. Out of place. Wrong. Drawn to it, he walked forward, heart thudding. Marla followed closely behind. The mailbox had no flag. No hinges. Just a slot. A single letter stuck halfway out. He pulled it free. No name. No address. Just a single sentence scrawled in rushed ink. What did you leave behind that summer? Elian's vision blurred. What had he left behind? He thought of the summer of 1987, the last one before everything changed. Before he stopped coming to the farmhouse. Before Marla vanished without saying goodbye. Before the laughter felt rehearsed and the light in the kitchen no longer felt warm. He dropped to his knees in the grass, the letter falling from his hand. I left myself, he whispered. I left the version of me that wasn't afraid to feel. Marla knelt beside him. I left too, she said. I left behind a girl who believed magic was real, who thought she could live in both worlds, childhood and everything after. They sat in silence for a long while. And then the chimes rang again. Not from the trees. From below. The earth beneath the mailbox trembled. Slowly, the grass peeled back, revealing a trapdoor. Wooden. Old. With the same fox symbol etched into the handle. They stood. Elian placed his hand on it. The trapdoor creaked open. A dark stairwell descended into shadow but lit by a faint, pulsing light from deep within. Marla looked at him. You sure? He nodded. If the story's ever going to make sense, we have to see what we tried to forget. And with that, they stepped into the dark. Not with fear, but with the full weight of everything they had remembered and everything still waiting to be reclaimed. Act 11, The Heart of the Forgotten Summer. The stairwell beneath the trapdoor breathed like a sleeping beast, not with menace, but with memory. Each step Elian and Marla took down into the shadow carried weight. Not physical. Emotional. The walls narrowed. The air cooled. and the light, that faint pulsing glow, grew brighter with each descent. They didn't speak. Not because there was nothing to say, but because words would have broken the silence that now held them gently, like cupped hands shielding a flame. At the bottom of the stairwell, the path leveled out into a corridor made of smooth stone, the kind found deep beneath the earth, untouched by sun or storm. Along the walls, hand-drawn murals began to appear. Crayon lines. Childlike symbols. Swirls of stars. Shapes of bicycles. A treehouse. A mailbox. Two stick figures holding hands. Elian reached out and touched one of the drawings. His voice caught. "This is mine." Marla placed a hand beside his. "So is this." They were inside their own memories. Not the ones they told stories about, the ones they made up to protect themselves from the ones they didn't. The corridor opened into a chamber. At its center stood a pedestal. Upon it a lantern. But instead of fire, the lantern held a swirl of summer light, golden, shifting, humming with soft warmth. It cast no shadow. Only glow. All around the room were objects. A stack of letters, unopened. A teddy bear missing one eye. A crumpled photograph of two kids at a fairground. A shoebox filled with seashells. Each one hovered slightly above its pedestal, gently spinning. "I know these," Elian whispered. "They're things I lost, but never stopped looking for." "They came here," Marla said, "when you stopped allowing yourself to grieve them." He moved slowly between them. Stopped in front of a notebook. The cover was peeling. On it was his name written in uneven block letters. He opened it. Inside was a single page. "I pretended I didn't miss them. I said I was okay. But the truth is I wanted one more day. Just one. To say thank you. To say goodbye." His voice trembled. "That was the summer my grandfather died." Marla stepped beside him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into her satchel and pulled out something Elian hadn't seen in years. A small metal locket. Oval-shaped. Worn smooth with time. She clicked it open. Inside, a photo of two children and a slip of paper that read, "Promise me we'll find our way back." Elian's breath caught. "That's mine. You gave that to me." "I found it," she said. "The year we stopped writing." He stared at it. "I thought it was gone." Marla looked around. "Maybe everything we thought we lost just waited." They stood together at the center of the room. And the lantern pulsed brighter. Its light reached toward them, swirling between their hands. Suddenly the chamber shifted. Not with sound, but with feeling. The murals around them moved. The stick figures ran. The bicycles rolled. The mailbox opened, letters flying free like birds. The wind returned. Warm. And the voice, the one they had both heard before, in dreams, in whispers, came clearly now, not outside, but within. You are not children anymore. But the summer still lives within you. The moment you remember, you are still home. The lantern burst not violently, but gently into thousands of floating lights. They filled the room like fireflies. One light landed in Elian's chest. Another in Marla's. And just like that, they were no longer in the chamber. They stood again in the field behind the farmhouse. But now it was evening. The real world. No glowing sky. No floating letters. Just the breeze. The chime on the porch. And the sound of cicadas singing into the dusk. Marla looked around slowly. We're back. Elian nodded. But not the same. He looked toward the horizon. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the wheat fields. But instead of sadness, he felt something else. Peace. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the locket. Still there. Still real. Marla pulled out the notebook. She smiled. We didn't dream it. And from the house a sound. Laughter. Soft. Not current. Not echoing. Just, there. Elian turned toward it. And smiled. Let's go home. Together, they walked toward the porch. Toward the swing that creaked just the way he remembered. Toward the scent of cinnamon and lemon balm drifting through the screen door. And as they reached the steps, Elian looked back one last time across the fields, toward the path that had taken them farther than they ever imagined. And in his heart, he whispered. The summer was never lost. It was just waiting for us to come back. Act 12, The Summer That Never Ended. The porch swing creaked beneath them, just as it had in a dozen memories, in 100 dreams. The twilight sky stretched out above the fields in ribbons of peach and violet. Fireflies blinked lazily near the edge of the orchard. Somewhere in the distance, a frog croaked once, as if announcing the shift from day into night. Elian leaned back, his shoulders finally loose, his breath steady. Beside him, Marla curled her legs up under her, cradling a warm cup of mint tea they'd brewed in the old kitchen. The cabinets had groaned, the kettle had whistled, and the window over the sink had let in the scent of honeysuckle, all exactly as he remembered. But this wasn't a dream anymore. The hollow had faded. The shifting worlds of memory and myth were behind them. They were here. Fully. And so was the summer. Alive. Present. Real. You know what's strange? Elian asked quietly. Marla turned, brow raised. I thought coming back would feel like the end, he said. Like closing a book. But it doesn't. She nodded slowly. Feels like a first page. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars begin to peek through the indigo above. The farmhouse creaked and sighed behind them like an old friend stretching after a long nap. Then Marla stood. I want to show you something. She slipped off the porch and disappeared around the side of the house. Curious, Elian followed. She stopped by the old shed, the one with the faded green door and the crooked window. She yanked the door open with effort, revealing dust-covered tools, boxes, and in the back an old canvas tarp. With both hands, she pulled it away. Underneath was a bicycle. Not just any bike. Elian's. Red frame. One training wheel gone. The other rusted but intact. He laughed. You're kidding. Marla grinned. You said you left part of yourself behind. Maybe, it waited. He stepped forward, brushing his fingers over the handlebars. Then he looked down a small envelope taped to the seat. It was yellowed with age. The name written on it was, "To us, when we're ready." They opened it together. Inside was a folded map, drawn in crayon. In the corner, a compass rose with the words, "Start here. Go where it feels like sunlight. Follow the sound of laughter. Return when your pockets are full of fireflies." No directions. No destination. Just one small sentence written at the bottom, in their combined handwriting. Let's make a new summer. One we never have to forget. Elian felt something catch in his throat. All those summers they'd lived, and yet somehow this one was the one they'd remember. Not because of magic. Not because of mystery. But because they had chosen to return. To feel. To live it again, not as children wishing for what was lost, but as souls who had finally remembered how to stay. That night, they slept in the attic. Same creaky bed. Same open window. Same breeze carrying the sound of cicadas and chimes from somewhere far away. Only this time, there were no dreams. Just rest. Just peace. And when dawn came wrapped in gold and birdsong, Elian sat up and smiled. Marla stretched beside him, sunlight on her cheek. What now? She asked. He stood, looking out the window, where the fields glowed and the path beyond the barn shimmered in the light. We start walking, he said. And this time, we go all the way. No turning back. No turning back. He turned toward the ladder, paused, and then added, "But maybe one stop by the mailbox. Just in case someone wrote us back." They both laughed. And the sound was light, and true, and endless. The summer never ended. It simply waited for them to return. Act 13, Letters from the Lost. It began with a letter. Not one they had written. Not one they had expected. Elian found it 2 mornings after the return, tucked inside the blue mailbox at the end of the drive. No stamp. No address. Just a cream envelope sealed with deep red wax, marked by a symbol neither of them had seen before, a stylized sunflower with spiraling petals. He stared at it for a long moment before calling out, "Marla, you might want to see this." She came out of the house barefoot, holding a half-eaten piece of toast. Her eyes narrowed as she saw the envelope. Was that already in the box? Elian shook his head. "I checked it yesterday. It was empty." He turned it over. Written in elegant script. "To those who found the hollow and still remember." Marla's face changed. Slowly, she reached over and broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment, folded twice. When Elian opened it, a gust of wind blew gently through the trees as if the world had been holding its breath. The letter read, "If you are reading this, you have crossed the threshold. You've remembered what many have forgotten. But you are not the only ones. There are others. Others who entered the hollow and never returned. Some are still dreaming. Others are trapped in loops of memory too heavy to carry alone. They are waiting for someone to find their story. For someone to knock on the door of their forgotten summer. Asterisk. If you choose to help, go to the orchard at twilight. Bring the locket. Follow the sound of the second chime. No signature. No instructions beyond that. Just silence." Marla slowly let out a breath. "So it wasn't just us." Elian nodded. "The hollow, it's bigger than we thought." He looked down at the letter again, then toward the orchard, quiet, peaceful, rustling gently under the summer breeze. "But who sent this?" he whispered. That night, as twilight fell and the first stars blinked into existence, they walked to the orchard. The locket in Marla's palm glowed faintly, as if it remembered the path before they did. And then a chime. But not the same tone as before. Lower. Slower. Like a memory calling from beneath water. They followed it. Past the familiar rows of trees. Past the old wooden gate. Until they found it. A letterbox nailed to the side of an oak. Old. Splintered. Unmarked. But when Elian opened it, another envelope waited inside. And so the real journey began. Not just into their own summer, but into the summers others had forgotten to wake up from. Act 14, the summer of 1964. The orchard was quiet when they arrived, almost too quiet. Elian held the envelope with trembling hands, the wax seal glistening in the fading light. The instructions inside had been clear: go to the orchard at twilight. Bring the locket. Follow the sound of the second chime. But nothing had prepared them for what lay beyond the gate. They stepped inside, feeling the coolness of the evening air wrapping around them. The trees, heavy with fruit, stood like sentinels, but something was off. The world seemed to hold its breath, the usual rustling of leaves and chirping of birds absent, replaced with a stillness so complete, it felt unnatural. In the distance, a faint chime rang, its tone low and steady. "There," Marla whispered, pointing toward the far end of the orchard. Elian nodded, and they walked toward the sound, their footsteps muffled by the thick grass beneath their feet. As they drew closer, they saw a small clearing in the middle of the trees. At the center, a wooden swing hung from a low branch of an ancient oak tree. The swing swayed gently, as though someone had just gotten up from it. Marla walked toward the swing. "This is it. This is where we're supposed to be." Elian scanned the area. "Where's the person we're supposed to help?" Just then, the chime rang again, louder this time, echoing through the orchard, as if it were calling them closer. At the base of the tree, just beneath the swing, something caught Elian's eye. A small pile of objects: a doll, a photo album, and a torn letter, yellowed with age. He bent down to pick up the album, his fingers trembling as he opened the first page. The first photograph was of a young girl no older than 10 or 11 with wild, curly hair and a bright smile. The photo was taken in a park, the background full of blooming flowers and a blue sky. Her name was written on the edge of the photo: Margaret Maggie Walker. Elian's heart skipped a beat. Maggie. This is her. Marla knelt beside him, staring at the photograph. But why is she still here? Why hasn't she moved on? They turned to the torn letter lying next to the photo. The writing was shaky, but legible. Dearest Maggie, I don't know how to say goodbye. Tomorrow, we leave and you will stay behind. I'll never forget the summer we spent in this house. I promise, I'll be back. But please, do not wait for me. Live. You have to live. Love. Mom. Elian looked up, eyes wide. She never left this place. She's still stuck in that moment. Marla's face softened with understanding. It's like she's trapped in the last day of that summer. She never got to say goodbye. Elian stood up, turning toward the swing. He stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his chest. As he reached out to touch the ropes of the swing, the world seemed to shift. And then, he saw her. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, just barely in view, a young girl with curly hair, dressed in a pale blue dress. She stood there, staring at them with wide, hopeful eyes. "Maggie." Elian called softly. She didn't answer, but she smiled. A small, sad smile. Slowly, Maggie stepped forward, her feet barely touching the ground. "I didn't think anyone would come," she said, her voice soft and trembling. "I've been waiting here for so long. I don't know what to do anymore." Marla stepped forward, gently reaching for the girl's hand. "You don't have to wait anymore, Maggie. You can go. You can move on." Maggie's eyes welled with tears. "But I don't want to leave. I want to remember. I want to remember the summer, the good times, before everything changed." Elian knelt beside her. "You don't have to leave the memories behind. But you have to live. You can't stay here forever." The swing behind them creaked again, but this time, the sound was different. It wasn't a haunting echo, it was the sound of something being set free. Maggie looked at them, her expression shifting from sadness to something lighter, more peaceful. "I remember now," she whispered. "I remember the love, the warmth of that summer. And it's okay to move on now. It's okay." As she spoke, the light around them seemed to shift. The trees seemed to grow brighter, the air warmer. And then, just like that, Maggie was gone. The swing stopped creaking. The chimes grew silent. Elian and Marla stood together in the stillness, the weight of the moment settling over them. "I think we helped her," Elian said quietly. Marla nodded. "We did. But I think we helped ourselves too." They walked back through the orchard, the world around them slowly returning to normal. The birds began to chirp again. The breeze picked up, and the sun began to dip lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. As they reached the edge of the orchard, Elian turned one last time to look at the clearing. The swing was empty. And the sound of the chimes was gone. But somewhere deep in the orchard, the memories of that summer of Maggie and her lost goodbye would live on forever. Act 15, The House Beneath the Forgotten Sky. The path was dim as they walked deeper into the forest, the trees crowding closer with each step. The air grew cooler, and the usual sounds of the orchard faded into a quiet hum. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only the faintest light to guide them. Marla led the way, her eyes scanning the shadows ahead. "I think we're close." Elian nodded, though he wasn't sure how he knew. There was something about the way the trees twisted and turned, as though they were trying to conceal the place they were heading. And then, just as the last bit of sunlight faded, they saw it. The house. It stood just beyond the trees, hidden from sight until now, a large, old Victorian house, its edges softened by time and ivy. The windows were dark, and the porch sagged slightly, as though the house had been forgotten by everyone except the forest. Marla stopped in her tracks. "This is it, isn't it?" Elian didn't answer right away. He was staring at the house, the way it seemed to call out to him, pulling memories he wasn't sure he had. "I think so," he said quietly. They crossed the threshold of the yard, the tall grass brushing against their legs, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. The house loomed before them, its wooden steps creaking underfoot as they approached the door. The old brass knocker had long since tarnished, but it still gleamed faintly in the fading light. Elian reached for the doorknob. It turned easily in his hand, as if the house had been waiting for them. The door opened with a heavy groan, and they stepped inside. The house was dark, the air thick with dust. It was exactly as Elian had imagined it, or perhaps, as he had forgotten it. The same old wallpaper peeling at the edges, the same narrow hallway leading into rooms long since abandoned. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet as they moved deeper into the house, the smell of stale air and old wood filling their noses. "It feels," Marla began, her voice quiet, "alive." Elian nodded. "It's like it's been waiting." They moved through the house in silence, each room a faded echo of its former self. The kitchen, still with its old cast iron stove, a few pots left carelessly on the counter. The living room, where a dust-covered piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed with age. In the farthest room of the house, they found a door. It was hidden behind a pile of old furniture, a wooden door with a tarnished lock. Elian's heart skipped as he approached it. He had no reason to believe that this door was anything more than another forgotten part of the house, but something in him, something deep and instinctual, told him this was where they needed to be. He reached out, his fingers brushing the handle. And then it clicked open. Inside was a small room, barely larger than a closet. But it was what was inside that took Elian's breath away. The walls were lined with shelves, but instead of books, there were old, faded envelopes. Piles of letters, carefully stacked and tied with string. Some were yellowed with age, others still sealed with wax, their stamps barely visible. Marla stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. "These are all letters," she whispered. "But, who wrote them?" Elian reached for the nearest envelope. The wax seal was cracked, and he peeled it back carefully, as if afraid the letter might disintegrate in his hands. The paper inside was thin, brittle with age, but the words were still clear. "To the ones who have come to find the lost summer. You are not the first. Many have walked this path before you, searching for what was taken from them. The stories of those who left, of those who could never return, are hidden here. If you seek answers, you must read them all. The summer never dies." It only waits. Elian's hands trembled as he read the letter. He passed it to Marla, and she read it too, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is it," Elian said, his voice low. "These letters, they're not just memories. They're real." Marla turned to him. "Real in what way?" "They're from the people who disappeared, the ones who got lost in the summer," he said, his mind racing. "They're still here, waiting to be found." Suddenly, there was a sound from behind them, soft footsteps, faint at first, then louder. Marla spun around, but there was no one there. Then the letters on the shelves began to move. It was subtle at first, just the slightest rustle. Then, the pile nearest them shifted. One letter slid out of its place and fluttered to the ground. Elian bent down to pick it up, his heart racing in his chest. He opened it carefully, and inside, the words were written in a different handwriting. "I am sorry. I did not mean to leave you. But the summer is not just a season. It is a place. A place we must all return to when we forget how to live. Please, don't be angry with me. I will find my way back." Marla looked at him, her face pale. "It's them. The ones who disappeared." Elian nodded, his fingers shaking as he folded the letter back up. "We have to help them. They're still here. They're all still here, waiting." But just as he spoke, the floor beneath them creaked, and the house seemed to shift. The walls groaned, and the ceiling above them began to tremble. "Something's happening," Marla whispered. Elian's eyes darted to the door. Behind it, something was moving. A shadow. And it was coming closer. Act 16, the voices beneath the floorboards. The house felt different now. The quiet, ancient air that had once been still was now thick with presence. Elian and Marla stood in the center of the dim room, the letters surrounding them like silent witnesses to a world beyond their own. The shadows had shifted, and the air hummed with energy. Something was waiting. Marla, her face pale but determined, reached for the next envelope in the pile. It was crumpled, with a faint scent of lavender. She opened it carefully, as if afraid the paper might crumble into dust. The letter inside was brief, written in a hurried hand. "Please, hurry. It is not enough to read these letters. The summer waits for us, but it is locked behind the walls. The key is buried beneath the floorboards. If you are reading this, you must act now. The others. The others are waking, and the house knows we are here." Elian's breath caught. "What does that mean?" Marla turned to him, eyes wide. "The others. Who? Who are they?" He glanced at the floor, his mind racing. Something about the house felt too alive, the way the floorboards seemed to shift beneath their feet, the way the walls creaked in rhythm with their movements. The house wasn't just standing there, it was listening. "It's the floor," Elian said, his voice tense. "The key. It's buried beneath the floorboards." He dropped to his knees, his hands searching the wooden planks. The house seemed to respond, as if it knew what he was doing. A faint hum vibrated through the air, and for a brief moment, the walls seemed to sigh. Marla knelt beside him. "Do you feel that?" Elian nodded, eyes narrowed in focus. "I think it's calling us." The sound grew louder. A steady thrum of energy. It was almost as if the house itself were alive, responding to their presence. He pressed his hands to the floor and found a soft spot, a section of wood that felt slightly different, almost hollow. With a low grunt, he dug his fingers under the boards, prying them loose. The air thickened. The hum grew louder. And then a creak. A soft whisper from somewhere deep inside the house. Something shifted beneath the floor. With a final pull, Elian yanked the last board free, revealing a small wooden chest beneath. It was aged and covered in dust, but the lock was intricate, a design that resembled a labyrinth. Elian hesitated for only a moment before grabbing the chest and lifting it up. He turned it over in his hands, and the small latch opened with a faint click. Inside the chest was not a treasure. Not gold or jewels. Instead, it was a collection of old photographs, each one worn with time, each one depicting a different person, many of them children standing in front of the same house, the same orchard, the same swing. One photograph caught Elian's eye. It was of a young girl around the same age as Maggie. She had the same curly hair, the same bright smile, and she was standing on the porch of the house, holding a letter. The back of the photo was scrawled with a single line. "The summer we almost forgot." Marla gasped, her eyes wide. "It's her. It's the girl we couldn't save." Elian turned the photograph over in his hands, tracing the faded words. "She's trapped. Just like Maggie. She was waiting for someone to come." Another photograph caught his eye. It was a group of children, standing together, their faces partially obscured by shadows. They were holding hands in a circle, standing in the yard, their eyes wide with an eerie sense of purpose. Marla leaned closer, her breath catching. What's happening here?" Elian didn't answer immediately. He could feel the weight of the house pressing in on them, urging them to understand, to act. And then, the floor beneath them began to shift. Not the way a building settles over time. This was something else, a deliberate movement, as if the house was pushing them towards something. The floorboards shifted with an unnatural groan, and a door appeared hidden beneath the floor, just where the chest had been. It was an old wooden door, cracked with age but still intact, with the same labyrinth design etched into the wood. The hum intensified. "This is it," Elian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to open it?" Marla nodded, determination set in her features. "Let's do it." They grabbed the old door handle, twisting it open with a creak. The door swung wide, revealing a hidden room dark and cold, filled with dust and forgotten things. But it wasn't the room that chilled Elian to the bone. It was the sound. A faint whisper. A soft voice, like a child calling from the dark. "Help me. Please, help me come back." The whisper seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, echoing in their minds. Marla stepped forward, reaching into the darkness. "Who's there? Who needs our help?" The room seemed to exhale, a soft breeze carrying the scent of lavender, and in the far corner, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a girl. She was young, no older than Maggie had been, with the same wild, curly hair. Her eyes were wide and full of fear. But her face was empty, as if it had been erased by time. She reached out with trembling hands, her voice soft and desperate. "I'm lost. I've been waiting, but I can't remember anymore." Elian's heart tightened. "Who are you?" The girl's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes flickered to the photographs, to the letters, to the memories strewn across the floor. "I'm one of them," she whispered finally. "I was forgotten. But you can help me remember." Act 17, the summer of 1972. The house was still. The air hung heavy in the dim light of late afternoon, thick with the scent of earth and time. Elian and Marla stood just outside the door to the hidden room, the lantern between them flickering with the faintest pulse of light. The echoes of the past had led them here, to another forgotten summer, another story waiting to be told. "Do you feel it?" Marla asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elian nodded. "It's different this time. This place, it's more solid." The letter they had found in the chest was still in his hand, crumpled but readable. The ink had bled slightly with age, but the words were clear. "If you are reading this, you have found the path to the summer of 1972. It was a year of waiting. A year of unfinished stories. The boy is still here, but he cannot remember why he is lost. Help him." They had followed the map from the house, crossing fields and forests, and now they stood before an old house, hidden deep in the woods. The structure was more dilapidated than the previous house they had entered, its walls sagging with age, windows boarded up as if the world had forgotten it completely. "We've seen this before," Elian said. "Another version of it?" Marla stepped forward, a determined look in her eyes. "We're not just here to look at it. We're here to help him." They pushed open the creaking door, stepping into the dusty interior of the house. The floorboards groaned under their feet, and the faint sound of a distant clock ticking echoed through the silence. The house seemed to watch them, its very walls breathing with the remnants of forgotten memories. At the center of the room, there was a rocking chair. It was empty. But not entirely. As Elian approached it, he felt a presence, something that wasn't quite there, yet felt alive. The letters scattered on the floor, just like in the last house, but this time, they were different. These were hastily written, the ink smudged as if they had been scribbled in a panic. Marla crouched down to pick one up, her fingers trembling as she opened it. She read aloud, her voice soft. "I don't know if I'll ever find you again. It's like I'm losing everything. The summer won't end, but it never feels like it's really here. I can't escape it. Please come back. I can't finish this without you." Her voice faltered at the end. This isn't just a letter. It's a plea." Elian stood up, looking around the room. Who wrote this? And who were they writing to? The rocking chair creaked again, slowly, as though being nudged by an invisible hand. The house seemed to groan in response, as if echoing the letter's cry for help. At the far side of the room, behind a shelf of forgotten trinkets, there was another door. It was smaller, hidden in the corner, almost unnoticed. Without a word, Elian and Marla moved toward it, their footsteps soft on the creaky floor. When they reached the door, Elian's hand hesitated on the handle. Something felt different this time. The air around it was thick with something they couldn't quite place. But the door opened with a gentle push. Inside, the room was dark, the only light coming from a small crack in the ceiling where the last rays of sunlight pierced through. A desk sat in the center, cluttered with papers, and a small cot was pushed up against the far wall, where a boy of about 12 or 13 sat, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't seem to notice them enter. "Elian," Marla whispered, her voice full of wonder. "This is him." Elian stepped forward, his heart racing. What happened to him? The boy didn't react. His eyes were unfocused, lost in the world of his mind. There was a stillness in the room, a quiet, like the air just before a storm. Slowly, Elian approached him, crouching down to his level. "Hey," he said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Can you hear me?" The boy blinked, his eyes shifting as if waking from a long, distant dream. He turned toward Elian, his face pale and drawn, his clothes worn and faded. But there was a certain emptiness in his gaze, a feeling that he had been trapped in a moment for far too long. I don't remember," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do." Marla knelt beside Elian, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You're not alone," she said gently. "We're here to help you remember. You're not stuck here anymore." The boy looked up at her, his eyes wide with confusion. But the summer, it never ends. It keeps repeating. Every day is the same. Elian's heart tightened. What is it you're waiting for? The boy's lips trembled as he spoke again, his voice breaking. I'm waiting for the one I lost. I don't know where they went, but I can't go on without them. I can't. A feeling of profound sadness washed over Elian. He understood, in a way, that this was a summer he had once lived, one where something was lost and never found again. A summer that never ended because the boy had never been allowed to leave it. Marla squeezed his shoulder. We have to help him move on. Help him find what he's been waiting for. Elian nodded, reaching out to the boy. You don't have to wait anymore, he said. You don't have to stay here. The summer can end. It's time to let go. The boy stared at him, a look of deep longing in his eyes. But how? Elian took a deep breath, his hand resting gently on the boy's arm. By remembering the good parts. The moments that made the summer special. And then, moving forward. The boy's face softened, his lips trembling as he whispered, I remember now. I remember the laughter. The sunshine. The days we spent together. Marla smiled softly. Then it's time to say goodbye. As the words left her lips, the room began to change. The walls, once so heavy and oppressive, seemed to lighten. The air felt warmer, as if the house itself had exhaled a long-held breath. The boy's form began to fade, not with fear, but with relief. His eyes closed, a peaceful smile spreading across his face as he let go of the weight that had held him in place. And just like that, he was gone. The room was quiet again, but this time, it was different. The air felt lighter, as if a burden had been lifted from the house itself. Elian and Marla stood in the now empty room, the silence heavy with the knowledge of what had just transpired. They had helped him find peace. But they knew that the journey was far from over. Where to next? Marla asked, her voice soft. Elian looked around the room, taking in the faded remnants of a life that had been caught in time. We keep going, he said, his voice filled with determination. There are still more stories waiting to be heard. More summers that never ended. Together, they walked out of the room, leaving the past behind, and stepping forward into the unknown. Act 18, The Village of Forgotten Days, 1965. The forest cleared as they walked, the path opening up into a vast, empty field. The air was thick with the scent of old earth and the heavy quiet that only places untouched by time seemed to hold. As they moved forward, Elian could feel the atmosphere shift, as though the land itself was bracing for something. In the distance, nestled between rolling hills, was a small village. It was almost like a mirage. The roofs of the houses peeked through the trees, and the smoke from chimneys rose lazily into the sky, thick and white. The houses were old, but not in the way of ruins. They looked as if they had been frozen in time, perfectly preserved but untouched by the years. "This is it," Marla whispered, her eyes scanning the village ahead. "This is where the letter said we would find them." Elian nodded, his heart racing. "But where is everyone?" They continued down the narrow path that led to the village. As they approached, they could see that the houses were not entirely abandoned. There were signs of life, faint but undeniable. A flower pot on a windowsill, a rocking chair slowly moving on the porch of one house, an old bicycle leaning against a fence. But as they reached the first house, there was no sound. No people. Only the quiet hum of the wind. The door to the house was open. Marla pushed it gently, and they stepped inside. The room was simple, with wooden furniture that looked worn but well maintained. A fireplace sat in the corner, a thin layer of ash covering the hearth. It felt normal, like any house they had ever visited. Except for one thing. On the table, next to a half-eaten loaf of bread, was an envelope. The wax seal on it was dark, almost black. And the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. It was written in the same elegant script they had seen in the other letters. Elian picked it up carefully, his fingers brushing the wax. Marla watched him closely as he opened it. The letter inside read, "To the ones who have come. You are not the first to search for us. We are the ones forgotten, the ones who never left. We are the ones who were lost in time, trapped in a moment we couldn't escape. But now, you have come. You are here to help us remember. The village is waiting, but it cannot wait until the story is told. There is a house in the center of the village. Go there. There, you will find what you seek." Elian looked up at Marla. The village. It's stuck in time. Marla's brow furrowed. But why? Why are they stuck here? Before Elian could answer, a sound echoed from the street outside, a faint whistle, followed by the sound of feet shuffling on the dirt road. Marla stepped toward the window and peeked out. A figure was walking down the street. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face. He wore a suit that was old-fashioned, even for the time, and he carried a small suitcase in one hand. "Who is that?" Elian asked, moving closer to the window. "I don't know," Marla said, her voice full of curiosity. "But I don't think he sees us." They watched as the man passed the house, his eyes straight ahead, never once turning to look at them. He walked with purpose, as if he had somewhere to be, but he never looked back. "Let's follow him," Elian said. They stepped outside, keeping their distance as they followed the man down the village street. It was then that they noticed something strange. The houses, though they appeared occupied, were eerily silent. The windows were dark. No voices. No laughter. It felt as if the village had been suspended in a moment, waiting for something to break the stillness. They reached the center of the village, where a large house stood. It was bigger than the others, with ivy crawling up its walls, its windows shrouded in darkness. The door was closed, but Elian could feel something inside, a presence, like a memory waiting to be recalled. The man with the suitcase had already entered. "This is it," Marla said. "This is where we're supposed to be." They pushed the door open, the old wood groaning as it gave way. Inside was the same sense of stillness, but this time, it was heavier. The air felt thick, thick with years of waiting. The walls were lined with portraits of people Elian did not recognize, their eyes fixed, staring forward as if they were waiting for him to ask the question. At the center of the room, the man was standing beside a large grandfather clock. Its hands were frozen at precisely 3:15. He turned to face them. "You're here," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper. "I've been waiting for you." "Who are you?" Elian asked, his voice steady, though his mind raced with questions. The man's face softened. "I am one of them. One of those who can never leave." "What do you mean?" Marla asked. The man stepped closer. "We are stuck here, in a place that doesn't move. The summer of 1965 is our prison, our moment. We were forgotten, and we're waiting for someone to remember." Elian's heart skipped. "You're the ones in the photographs, aren't you?" The man nodded slowly. "Yes. And you are the ones who can free us." He walked to the grandfather clock and gently placed his hand on its surface. "The key to the village's freedom lies in this clock," he explained. "The moment it ticks again, the village will wake. But to make it happen, you must complete the story. You must remember what happened." "What happened?" Elian whispered, his heart racing. The man's face grew sad. "We were supposed to leave. But something happened, something we couldn't fix. And so we stayed. In this village. Forever." Marla stepped forward, her eyes wide. "What do you need us to do?" The man turned to face them, his eyes filled with both sadness and hope. "Help me remember. Help me find the key to unlock this moment." Elian stepped closer to the clock, his fingers hovering over the brass hands. "How do we do that?" The man smiled faintly. "You already know. You have the key. The letters, the photographs. You have everything you need." Act 19, The Clock That Ticks Again. The air in the room felt heavier as Elian stood before the grandfather clock, its frozen hands mocking him. The man had just spoken. The key to the village's freedom lies in this clock. but how could they set it in motion again? The answer, it seemed, was buried deeper than any of them had anticipated. Marla's voice broke the stillness. You said the clock is the key, but how do we unlock it? The man, the figure from the village, trapped in this perpetual summer, looked at them with a gaze full of both longing and despair. The clock itself is a prison, but also the key. It must be turned by someone who has unfinished business. Someone who remembers the summer. It needs a trigger. Elian felt a strange sense of déjà vu, his fingers instinctively brushing the surface of the clock's brass hands. He knew this feeling, this pull, from something deep in his past. But what? Marla stepped closer to him. Maybe we're the ones who need to remember, she said softly. The man nodded. Exactly. You're the ones who can break the cycle. But the story must be completed first. Elian, Marla whispered, do you remember? Elian closed his eyes, trying to focus. Flashes of images danced in his mind: sunburned afternoons, a garden full of flowers, the smell of old books, and faces, familiar faces, but fading. He could feel the story, the summer, slipping away, like a half-remembered dream. Then it hit him. The locket. The one he and Marla had carried with them from the first house. The locket that had led them this far. The one thing that tied their pasts together. Elian. Marla's voice pulled him from his thoughts. I think I remember, he said, his voice trembling. He turned to the man. The locket. The key is in the locket. The man's eyes widened with understanding. Yes. That locket holds the memory of the summer. The key lies in the memory of what you lost. The key is in what you've forgotten. Marla stepped forward. What does that mean? What are we supposed to do? Elian swallowed, his heart pounding. The locket has been holding onto the summer. If we unlock it, the memories will flood back. The moment will change, and the clock will begin again. The man looked at them, his eyes full of expectation. You must open it. You must unlock the memory of the summer. With shaking hands, Elian reached for the locket. He could feel the weight of it, the history embedded in its tiny form. The latch clicked open. Inside was a small, folded piece of paper. Elian unfolded it, his fingers trembling as he read the message inside. Asterisk to those who are lost. You have walked through the door, and now you must make the choice. The summer can never return to what it was, but you can carry it with you. The past cannot be undone, but the future can be saved. The clock ticks when you remember, but it does not stop. It only moves forward. The key is not time itself. The key is what lies beyond it. A surge of energy rushed through Elian as the words settled into his mind. He looked up. This is it. We have to make a choice. The village doesn't need us to fix the past. It needs us to give them the chance to move forward. Marla nodded, understanding. We have to let go. We have to free them. The room seemed to shimmer around them, and the clock's hands, which had remained still for so long, began to tremble. The man, who had once been bound to the village, stepped forward. The choice is yours. Set us free. The clock began to tick. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. And then, as if by magic, the ticking became louder, clearer, as though the entire house was waking from a deep sleep. The walls groaned as if stretching for the first time in years. Marla took Elian's hand, squeezing it tight. Do it, she said softly. With a deep breath, Elian turned the hands of the clock. It clicked. The gears inside the clock began to churn, and with each turn, the house around them seemed to shift. Suddenly, the world outside the house felt different. The stillness faded, replaced by the soft sounds of nature, the rustle of leaves, the hum of distant conversation. The air seemed to buzz with life again. The man who had stood by the clock all this time smiled, a peaceful expression crossing his face. It's done, he said softly. We are free. Elian and Marla stepped back as the village began to come alive. The streets that had been empty were now filled with people who had once been trapped in the endless summer, now returning to life. The houses, once dark and forlorn, were now bright and vibrant, the windows open to the sun. We did it, Marla whispered, her voice full of wonder. Elian nodded, his heart full of relief. The village can finally move on. They're free now. But as they stood in the middle of the street, watching the world come alive around them, Elian felt a strange sense of loss. The summer was over, but the memories, the feelings, they would remain with him forever. Marla turned to him. What happens now? Elian smiled faintly. We keep going. We've helped them. But there are still more stories. More people who need us. The village behind them had come to life, but for Elian and Marla, the real journey was just beginning. Act 20, The School Beneath the War. The evening air felt colder as Elian and Marla stepped into the overgrown yard of the old school. The once pristine white walls of the building were now gray, chipped, and covered in ivy. The windows were shattered, the playground rusted with age, and yet, there was a certain presence about the place, as though it was still waiting for something, someone. We've made it, Marla said, her voice barely above a whisper. This is where the next chapter lies. Elian nodded, looking around the yard, his mind already racing. But where are they? Where are the souls we need to help? They walked up to the entrance, the door creaking on its hinges as if the building was acknowledging their arrival. Inside, The hallway stretched before them, dark and empty, but with the faintest hum of something long forgotten. The air felt heavier here, laden with the ghosts of a time long past. It was clear from the worn desks and faded chalkboards that this was a school, but not just any school. The classroom was filled with traces of lives once lived. Old books, scraps of paper, broken glasses. A clock on the wall stopped at 2:45 the same time every day, frozen in place. "There's something about this place," Elian murmured. "It feels like the past is pressing on us." Marla reached out and touched a dusty chair. "These children, they never left, did they?" Elian turned to face her. "They couldn't. The war. The fear, the uncertainty. These kids were trapped in a moment, a memory they couldn't escape." The sound of a bell rang out, though the clock hadn't moved. Elian and Marla looked at each other, both sensing that this was no ordinary sound. The bell chimed again. From the corner of the room, a voice echoed soft, almost drowned by the silence of the building. "Elian." "Marla." They spun around. A figure stood at the back of the room, half illuminated by the fading light. The figure was a child, no older than 10 or 11, wearing an old school uniform. The boy's face was pale, his eyes hollow, like someone caught between waking and dreaming. "You're here," the boy said, his voice cracked and filled with longing. "I knew you would come." "Who are you?" Elian asked, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm one of them," the boy whispered. "One of the children left behind. We never left the war. We're still here, caught in the classroom, caught in the lessons we never finished." Marla stepped closer. "What happened to you?" The boy's eyes filled with pain. "We were supposed to leave, but the war took everything. The school. It became our prison. We waited for it to end, but it never did. The clock stopped when it was time to go home. And now, we're here, stuck in this moment. Forever." Elian felt a tightness in his chest. The boy wasn't just stuck in time, he was caught in an uncompleted lesson, a moment where the world had stopped moving, and the children had never had a chance to live beyond it. "What can we do to help?" Marla asked softly. The boy's eyes brightened slightly. "You need to finish the lesson. You need to teach us what we were never taught." Elian turned toward the blackboard, where faded writing remained, half erased by time. He could barely make out the words, but he could feel their weight. This wasn't just about freeing the boy. It was about completing the story, the lesson they were never given. Elian approached the chalkboard, his fingers brushing the dusty surface. He could hear the faint sound of children's laughter in the distance. The whisper of pages turning. The sound of voices reciting lines. The clock on the wall ticked again. This time, the hands moved. Slowly. The bell rang once more, and the classroom seemed to breathe. The boy stepped closer. You have to finish what we started. Elian turned to face him. How? The boy pointed to the door. In the next room. The last desk. It holds the key. Marla looked at Elian. We have to go. They walked toward the door, the hall now illuminated by an unnatural light. As they stepped into the next room, they saw it a single desk, untouched, with a notebook resting on it. The pages were crisp with age, but still legible. Elian opened it slowly, his heart pounding in his chest. The writing inside was simple, yet profound. To the ones who will finish this lesson. The war took so much. But we were still here. We still lived, even in the smallest moments. If you are reading this, you must take the lesson to heart. Teach it, carry it with you. Don't forget. The war may have ended, but the lesson is just beginning. Marla stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch the words. This is it. This is what they needed. They weren't just waiting for the war to end. They were waiting for someone to remember. Elian nodded. And now we remember. The boy appeared beside them again, his face a mixture of relief and sadness. Thank you, he whispered. Now we can move on. As the words left his mouth, the room seemed to shift. The desk faded. The clock ticked forward, its hands sweeping to a new hour. And then, the bell rang again. But this time, it was different. It was the sound of a final bell. The boy's form began to fade, the sadness lifting from his eyes. His body softened into light, and in the space where he had stood, only a faint echo remained. The world around them shifted once more, as if the school was finally waking up. The children who had been trapped in the classroom slowly began to appear, their faces softening with understanding. They were free. They were no longer caught in the war, no longer bound by the past. And as Elian and Marla stood there, watching the children smile and walk away into the light, they knew their work here was done. But the journey was far from over.